Because they destroy cities. They burn them down, riot, pillage, and steal.
You're being filmed, Mom.
Pardon?
You're being filmed by this man.
Yeah, live.
Let me film you, now tell me.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter. They blow up buildings, they burn buildings, they pillage and loot, and they rape. And their leaders are millionaires. They squandered their money. They money laundered the money, and they had 4 houses in California. You must watch too much CNN. Yeah, you need to stop watching CNN. You'll know what's going on in the world. Yes, Oklahoma's for Equality have shut down here in Bartlesville. No more homosexual parades, no more drag shows in Bartlesville, thank the Lord. No more drag shows in Bartlesville, thank the Lord. Yes, the street preachers, hey, there's our buddy.
Has the congressman made it yet?
Probably.
Okay, I didn't know if he's
He usually gets here early. I've been following him all day,
Oh, okay. Wow.
all the way from McAllister.
Really?
And all the way up.
Wow. That's dedication.
It's fun. Thank the Lord that Oklahoma's for Equality Bartlesville chapter is shut down. They are history. They tried to come against the street preachers, and the street preachers beat them. It's a great day in Bartlesville. Yes, the homosexual community is in disarray. Thank God for America, home of the free, land of the brave. God bless America, land that I love. Where else but America could street preachers shut down the homos of Bartlesville and all the lesbos and queers and totally disband the Oklahoma's for Equality Bartlesville chapter? Where else in America? Yes. Thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen, 2 great American patriots who love God and the country and our Constitution. Thank God for the Constitution that allows free speech in America. Yes, it's a great day in America. Thank God for Donald Trump. Thank God for the street preachers shutting down Oklahoma for Equality Bartlesville chapter. No more drag shows, no more homo shows.
I'm not speaking to the right people.
I'm preaching to the right people. Obviously, you need to hear it. Yes, lots of grandparents have forfeited their babysitting rights because they're homosexuals and groomers of children. Yes. Watch out for the grannies who are homosexuals and lesbians. Yes, watch out for them. It's a great day in Bartlesville. There's no more drag shows, no more homo shows. Oklahoma for Equality in Bartlesville has been shut down just by a few couple street preachers. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Just 2 or 3 street preachers shut down all the queers and lesbos and drag shows in Bartlesville. Great day in America. Thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen, 2 great American patriots. You don't look too happy. Yes, it's a great day. Looks like the Democrat sourpusses are coming out in force in Bartlesville. Yes. Looks like there's a bunch of Democrats here tonight. Bunch of Democrats. Thank God that a few street preachers have shut down the drag shows and the homo shows and the homo parades in Bartlesville. Shut down Oklahoma's for Equality, Bartlesville. Thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen, two conservative, patriotic, God-fearing Americans. Yes, glad you agree. Yes, who love the Constitution and the freedoms we have here in this country.
How about the other side of your sign?
Yeah? Thank you. It's a great day. It's a great day in America. Lots of police force out here, more than McAllister. They must realize there's a bunch of Democrats. They may be taking a bunch to the prison, to jail. Thank God there's no more drag shows in Bartlesville. No more homo shows and parades in Bartlesville. Thank God the Oklahomans for Equality have been shut down in this city by a couple of street preachers. Can you imagine that? All it took was a few God-fearing people to shut down the queers in Bartlesville. Thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen, two God-fearing Americans. Yes, it's a great day. Yes, it's a great day in America. Trump's in the White House. That's a great day. And he's just getting started. And the liberals are going crazy and howling. They don't know how to handle it. They need some safe spaces and some cookies and crayons and coloring books and some comfort toys. Hello. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. Yes, it's a great day in America because Donald Trump is president. And also Josh Brecheen's our U.S. Congressman. Yes, conservative government is the best, ruling by our Constitution that allows human rights and freedoms unlike no other country in the world has ever experienced. Thank God there's no more homo parades, no more drag shows in Bartlesville. By a couple preachers have shut them down. That's all it took. Yes, thank God the queers are going back in their closet here in Bartlesville. That's where they belong, back in the closet. They want to groom your kids and your grandkids and turn them into queers, get them gender confused and full of gender dysphoria. Bartlesville, Oklahoma, owned by the street preachers. Josh Brecheen Town Hall, look at all these cars. There's a bunch of Democrats here. I mean, I'd say half of them are Democrats. I could tell as they walk in by their reactions. A bunch of old white Democrats. Yes. Thank God that Donald Trump is our president and Josh Brecheen's our U.S. Congressman. God-fearing Americans who love God, country, and the American Constitution. Thank God for the freedoms and privileges we have here in America. All countries envious and want to destroy us and put us in tyranny like they are in. Thank God the homosexual parades and the drag shows have been shut down in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Yeah, this is going to be the biggest gathering of the whole day. The grand finale. The grand finale for the day, Bartlesville. Oh, this is going to be fun. Yes, deport every illegal out of America. Get rid of the illegal aliens who are breaking our constitutional laws by their very presence in this country. Thank God for ICE taking care of the problem. Thank God for Donald Trump cleaning up Washington, D.C. in less than 2 weeks. That shows that Tulsa could be cleaned in less than 2 weeks. Every city in America could be cleaned in 2 weeks. Donald Trump has shown the way. He's leading the way. And that just shows that our mayors and our district attorneys in Oklahoma want crime in their counties. They want crime in their cities because Donald Trump just showed he could clean up the entire Washington, D.C. district in less than 2 weeks. Get rid of Democrat government and rhinos. Oklahoma is filled with rhinos. Josh Brecheen is not a rhino. Langford is a rhino. Get rid of Langford. Yes, thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen. Thank God that Bartlesville's been ridden of the homosexual Oklahoma for Equality, Bartlesville chapter. They've been shut down. Thank God there's no more drag shows in Bartlesville. No more homosexual events. Thank God for now there's a reprieve. The sodomites are back in the closet. Yes, the queers are back in the closet. The lesbos are back in the kitchen probably. Hopefully. Yes, thank God for ICE and cleaning up this country. Deport every illegal. DEI. DEI stands for deport every illegal. Get all the illegals out of this country. Send them back to where they came from. Send them to Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. Thank God for America. You know, this is going to be the big one. This is the grand finale. See all these cars? These are all here for this rally. I mean, Bartlesville is a big liberal city. This is where Phillips Petroleum has been financing the queers for a long time. And they've only quit because Trump has threatened to fine the corporations who are funding the DEI agenda. And so that's what shut down the Bartlesville for Equality chapter branch here in Bartlesville, is the fact that they have no more funding from the USAID money. And they're shut down. So yes, there's old liberal homos in this city. I'd say probably 50-50 homo conservative, liberal conservative, Democrat conservative. Deport every illegal alien.
Is this your day job?
Pardon?
Is this your day job?
No, this is my day off. I'm self-employed. I'm an entrepreneur.
Do you find fun in this?
Pardon?
Do you find fun in this?
Oh, this is great. Yes, this is what I do for fun. This is what Christians do for fun.
No, it's not. They don't. They do not
Sure,
judge people.
it's a whole lot more fun than having a drag show.
That's not Christianity at all.
It's a whole lot more fun than having a drag show. Oh no, I'm one of the ones that helped shut down the drag show here in Bartlesville. Yes, there's no more drag shows in Bartlesville. There's no more pride events and drags in Bartlesville because of me and my friends. Yes, I'll take credit for that. Yes, thank God in Bartlesville there's no more drag shows. No more pride events. Oklahoma for Equality Bartlesville chapter is in disarray. They've disbanded this, and they are in no more operation. Out of operation, ceasing all functions. Thank God the groomers of children trying to confuse them into gender dysphoria are no longer in power in Bartlesville. Now, the next best thing would be if everybody in Bartlesville would have a revival and get truly born again and get saved and get right with God and start obeying the Bible and obeying the commandments of the Lord Jesus Christ. For Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That means if you break his commandments, you hate God. Yes, if we love Jesus, he said, we'll keep his commandments. Thank God for the freedoms of America, that we can obey God according to the dictates of our conscience and according to the principles of the Word of God, the Holy Bible. Yes. Lots of people here today. This is going to be the grand finale here in Bartlesville for Josh Brecheen. I know how he operates now. He gives like a 30 to 45 minute presentation to those slides, those charts that are impeccable. He's done his homework. He's got the facts. They're irrefutable. And then he opens it up for questions and answers. And I detected this might be a little bit of a live thing tonight, more lively than Muskogee. Muskogee was our liveliest one so far today, our largest one today. And this is by far going to be 4 times larger than Muskogee. So it might get a little lively in there. I've been on here for 19 minutes. I'll go for maybe 10 more minutes and then go inside. Yeah, it looks like about everybody who is coming here is here. No more cars coming in. Might be one coming in, turning in slow. Yeah, some of them got here pretty early. Yep, there's a couple new ones. Got to greet them. Thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen. Thank God for the street preachers getting rid of the drag shows and the homosexual events out of Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Now, if everybody would just get saved in this city and become born-again Christians, it'd be wonderful. Heaven on earth would it be if everybody in Bartlesville was a Christian and started obeying God. Well, there's still a few coming. Yeah, I'll go till I have 30 minutes on here. Yes, it's a great day to be a God-fearing American in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Donald Trump is president and Josh Brecheen's our congressman. Great day. Great day. Couldn't ask for a better day, except to reverse all of the liberal, God-hating laws and statutes and policies that have been enacted for the Obama and the Biden administration, and reverse it, take it back. Thank God for Donald Trump realizing he needs a clean house. Thank God for Elon Musk and Doge and wiping out the USAID money going to the homosexual communities, having all their drag events and their homosexual orgy parties. Yes, no more money for the queers. It's a great day in Bartlesville. Donald Trump is president. Josh Brecheen is U.S. congressman. Street preachers shut down all the homosexual drag shows in Bartlesville. It's a great day. Alrighty, something tells me we're going to have fun inside. So I'll put the banner away. Say it might be about 50-50 Democrat, Republican inside there. They got lots of police presence here. I think maybe they called some more in when they saw how many people were going to show up. Had the banner out long enough to dry off from this afternoon. In the Wagner. Hello. Thank you.
What?
Thank you.
I don't know
I
what.
got one earlier.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Page 26, 20 was not done, though, sorry. Federal extends a double standard deduction and provides an additional $1,500 increase for families beginning 2025. Standard deduction. We increased that amount relative to what we talked about, moving to the $15,000 mark. Enhances tax relief for families who experience the child tax credit. Who has children in the room? Right. Prior to 2017, the tax credit, all right, what's the difference between a deduction and a credit? Deduction, you set aside whatever that amount is, the 20%, like we just talked about, would be set aside and everything else is taxed. A credit has to do with, once you've tabulated how much you owe, a credit dollar for whatever you owe to the government, that you can subtract whatever your tax credit that you're eligible for is from what you actually were going to pay the government. Okay? So the child tax credit prior to 2017 was $1,000. Now, post passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, that child tax credit is now $2,200. So, let's say that you have one child, and your federal tax liability is $2,200. Okay, just to make that simple here. Let's say that you know that you owe $2,200 as your federal tax liability. But now, you can claim the child tax credit because of the $2,200 valuation. What is your taxable, what do you owe the federal government? Zero. So, for those of you who have grandchildren, think about the children who are raising those children, how that's going to modify their tax liability. For those of you who have children, you need to, now this is also permanent. Pages 26, 27, 28, we've gone through this enough today, I know we can't get to it, but it delineates all this with greater granularity. We poured hours over trying to make sure all that specificity is explained. All right. The adoption tax credit, $5,000, that's a change in this. The account for newborns, you keep hearing about it, for $1,000. How many of you have concerns that moving ahead because of what's ahead for Social Security and because of the payroll tax not keeping up with the number of people on Social Security, that Congress Trustees are managing that. We all know that Social Security is insolvent in the next 8 to 9 years. How many of you are concerned generations from now about your kids or your grandkids as it relates to Social Security? So this is a 3-year kind of pilot program. And part of the thinking, as I talked to the Ways and Means Chairman, is you have to find some funding to be able to continue it. But this may be a means of assisting those kiddos that are being born right now. Right? If we aren't able to be able to find the fix that we're going to have, then these kids, many years in the future, they're being born right now, that $1,000 for this 3-year time period is going to also be an account that you can add to if you are an employer. Maybe something those kiddos, we'll see what it turns into. That was part of the rationale in that. The 20% small business deduction, again, so it's like 20%. And that doesn't just apply to businesses, y'all. Farms, ranches, that all would fall under that category. Health savings accounts are addressed. We'll talk about the base contribution here a little later. Expensing. Immediate expensing for equipment. Let's say you buy a tractor. Let's say you got on your place, you got a tractor, you want to buy it. Cattle prices are pretty good right now, right? Okay? So, years in the past, you would have had to be able to, if you bought that tractor, you thought this is the year cattle prices were great, and we all, if you've been in the cattle business, you know it doesn't last very long usually, right? But it's been good for a number of years. And so, if you wanted to buy that tractor as a real expense long term, used to you have to gradually depreciate it now. Now, you can do 100% of the valuation against whatever that cash check was, right? Same thing applies to businesses. We've been able to bring about this bonus depreciation in the immediacy of taking advantage of it in the current fiscal year. Continuity of the farm program. We had a farm bill we had to address. Part of One Big Beautiful Bill buys us some time to be able to do that, puts an extender on it. We talked about the 20%, the 199A for LLCs. Again, a deduction. Sets aside at 20%, moves it over, and what was going to happen, what are LLCs taxed at? Whatever your individual tax rate is. So there are some people who could have found themselves in a 37% tax bracket. And so there is a lot of businesses that are going to find relief through that 199A reduction. 2017, they did a corporate tax rate change, permanent change in corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. But small businesses did not see that same level of assistance. That has been corrected through the 199A change to bring parity. And we're going to talk about the corporate tax rate in 2017 later on. Death tax. How many of you have family members that you know of or friends who talked about losing a place because of the tax bill? My family, my mother's side, in the 70s, that occurred. And for years, Congress has been hearing about this and trying to address this. We now have a per individual, $15 million valuation for the death tax. And that if you fall under that category, many people rightly believe that you've been taxed with everything that you've put together in assembling that piece of property, and that death should not be a taxable event. All right, next slide. Mandatory spending. This is a pie chart to show you the difference between what's called mandatory and discretionary spending. Mandatory spending is the only thing by law we can address in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Reconciliation is the word reconciliation, which is what the One Big Beautiful Bill was when I came to the Budget Committee. It reconciles how much we have in revenue relative to how much we have in spend. It's to reconcile that chasm of about $2 trillion, the difference between the two. And a reconciliation bill allows you to be able to have a 50 plus 1% vote on getting something done. Almost everything now in Congress that is policy related takes 60 votes in the Senate. And reconciliation bypasses that requirement while both Democrats and Republicans, when they had the trifecta of control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, have utilized this for their major policy reforms. The Green New Deal, that was what was utilized, the reconciliation the Democrats utilized to bring in the Green New Deal. I have no problem with you saying that. And so Republicans now utilize it for the One Big Beautiful Bill. But you have to know by the statutory allowance, it can only address mandatory and the financial picture cannot overweigh the policy changes. It has to make sure that this is really adjusted finances because you're reconciling the difference between outlays and revenue. So what I want you to see is in 1965, Congress had control over 66% of the budget. On page 6, you can't see this in your handout. We had control over 66% of the budget discretionary, and only 34%, that was Social Security back then, was under the mandatory side. Well, this is what's happened now that so much has been moved over to mandatory. 74% of your government, your federal government's on autopilot, managed by trustees at the rate of inflation. Only 26% of everything that is paid for in Washington, D.C. is actually a vote through the appropriations process. Again, reconciliation is designed to reconcile, and so it's also only can touch mandatory. So we had to go into the mandatory to try to be able to utilize this process to bring a correction to our excessive spend and to address our tax situation. Mandatory spending. Again, you're seeing the same thing. This is all mandatory up from this bar right here. Discretionary is the last two. You'll notice the discretionary 12 appropriation bills happens defense spending. What I want you to notice is Social Security, 1.5 trillion is what we spent on it in 2024. This is how much revenue comes in. This is our deficit. 1.9 in 2024, we're headed to almost 2.3 in deficit. But I want you to notice payroll taxes covered 1.7 trillion. What is a payroll tax? Payroll tax is the 7.65% that you give out of your paycheck, and the employer gives another 7.65% out of their side of the ledger, combined to get 15+%. It was designed when the Social Security system was set up in 1935. That payroll tax was designed to support Social Security in 1935. Back then, instead of being 7.65 per person, it was 1% per person. But what happened is you'll notice in 1965, how on the chart I showed you, how we began to grow the mandatory spending side. We added some things called Medicare and Medicaid, right, to the mandatory side of the program. And we said Medicare would be supported by the payroll tax. What I want you to notice is how much the payroll tax is delivering right now in revenue at 1.7 trillion. How much are we spending on Social Security? Now here's Medicare over here. It was added in 1965, supposed to be supported by the payroll tax. We only have enough barely to cover what we're paying out of Social Security. Medicare has been pulled out of the general fund for many, many years. Social Security is in better shape than Medicare. When you hear people talk about the insolvency ahead for both programs, it's almost in sync 8 to 9 years from now. I want you to understand what's going on. The payroll tax, even though it's 7.65% per person, per employee and employer, 15% total, it has not stayed up with this. The drivers of these major mandatory spending programs, again, the one big beautiful bill cannot touch Social Security. And the President of the United States said we will not touch Medicare. So that left us talking about Medicaid and other welfare, which includes SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, known as other generations called food stamps. Okay? Now, how big is this income tax bucket on revenue? It's the biggest. So when we get into the conversation about income taxes, in those 7 graduated tax brackets, it's going to be very important that you understand for revenue why we have to pay attention to the individual income taxes. Payroll tax, just enough to support this. It does not support general governance. It supports Social Security, barely enough to support Medicare a little. Let's talk about the corporate tax, the very bottom here, $530 billion. Remember I told you earlier that the corporate tax rate changed in 2017 from 35% went to 21%? We had, depending on what year you looked at, we had the second highest corporate tax rate of any industrialized nation. Maybe it's number 3, maybe it's number 4, depending on the year you want to look at. What was happening is people had figured out that you can still do business in America, just domicile somewhere else. So what happened in 2017, because we had one of the highest corporate tax rates of any industrialized nation, in 2017, the Congress back then, I've only been 2.5 years, they decided that they were going to change that from 35% to 17%. What was the result? In 2017, you have to go back and look, I'll tell you because I've studied the numbers, We're about $250 billion is what we're bringing in 2017 when we're taxing corporations at 35%. $250 billion. Here we are, less than a decade later, and it's been dropped to 21%. And how much are we bringing into revenue? Almost twice, actually more than twice. Almost, it's going to look at the math, but it's almost twice, or it is twice. You said, well, 200 years we operated, we've had the corporate tax out there for, decades upon decades. How in the world, by cutting the tax rate, did it bring in more revenue? I'm a big believer in, and you take the big tax policy, many times, whatever you tax, you get less of. And this corporate tax change and how much more revenue we're bringing in is a glaring example of you got to be really intentional about the way that you do tax policy. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, that bottom left-hand, 17%, page 8. That's what that 17%, you'll find the bottom left-hand corner over here. That number is the most important in this graph. That is the average revenue that we as a nation have been collecting for 60 plus years. Why does that matter? Because it tells you what the American people have been willing to give to the federal government. And when there would be excessive amount of taxation, that brown line, guess what would happen? People would demand tax relief. And then the black line represents how much spend. Had the one big beautiful bill not been adjusted, the way we had just adjusted it, we were headed towards a 19% revenue. Again, this is a country pretty particular about taxation. 1776 had a pretty big issue over it, without representation. We're pretty particular about how much we're willing to pay. Now, but I want you to look at the spend. Remember, what's a reconciliation? To reconciliation bill 4, to reconcile the difference between our spend and our revenues. Look where spending was headed. So the one big beautiful bill, and many of these government programs we're going to talk about that were headed above, they were spending every year, year over year, higher than the rate of inflation. What's the rate of inflation normally? What'd you say? No. No, the rate of the CPI. Let's talk about CPI. 2.5. Okay, 2.5 is, I don't know where you get your 10, but we can come back to that. You're not problem. 2.5, consumer price index, that's pretty average, okay? But government has been growing at a rate of about 4%. When I got to Congress, they told us from the CBO, when I got on the budget committee, the expectation was the government assumed, CBO assumed a 4% year-over-year government growth rate, while the economy was only growing 2.5%. Y'all, this is why this looks like this. Because we continue to grow government at a greater clip, a greater pace than what the economy has been growing. All right. And what I also say with that, that's also a graph that indicates what Reagan said was true, that the reason why you have deficits is not because you tax too little, it's because you spend too much. All right. So we're going to try to reconcile. We're going to do the tax side. We've got to worry about how much that we're looking at on the program side. Who saw as a percentage change in their tax liability the greatest percentage change? So this chart's going to show you. Those bottom left-hand corner that made $15,000 to $50,000 had 17% change relative to their tax liability. They had the greatest positive change out of the one big beautiful bill. If you made between $50,000 and $100,000, you get a 12% change percentage-wise relative to your tax bill. And then the 10% for the upper tax brackets. So what I'm pointing this out to say is when people try to skew the numbers and make the numbers say who benefited the most, or percentage adjustment in terms of the way the tax code is structured, the lower income. All right, let's go to the next. You say, well, how can that be? What are the real dollar numbers? People are going to talk about the top 1%. So we need to make sure everybody's on the same understanding. If you can't see this, pull up page 10. Top, right here is how much of the total income tax collection comes from what percentage of the population. The top 1% of all earners. And you can fact check this through the Tax Foundation also. I know John Ford and I used that little Tax Foundation booklet when we served together years ago. The top 1%, what I'm trying to say is, If you don't like this group, pull up the Tax Foundation, which is another reputable group to fact check me, right? The top 1% right now pays 42% of all income taxes. The top 1% of earners pay 42% of all income taxes. And remember I showed you a while ago in terms of revenue coming into the federal coffer? That income tax is a very big deal. The top 1% pay 42% of all income taxes. You go right up the list and see that the top 5% are paying in the 60% range. Add a few more people to that, get to the top 10% of earners. They're paying somewhere in the 70 percentile range. The top 25% of earners, top 25 pay almost 90% of all income taxes. Top 25%. Now let's talk about the top 50% of earners. What's the average income in Oklahoma? $36,000. Oklahoma's average income right now is $36,000. So when you think about top 50% of earners, or bottom 50% of earners, I'll give you a number to kind of think through, okay? And remember, the top 1%, the top 25% of earners, those that make a significant amount of money, they're carrying, top 25, carrying the burden for almost 90% of all income taxes. But when you add the top 50%, you get 7 more percentage points. The top 50% of earners pay 97% of all income taxes. The top 50% of all earners pay 97% of all income taxes.
Then it begs the question, was not on this chart. Did I lost it? Did I lose it? Hello? Okay. Y'all hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Okay. All right. So what we should have done is we prepared better. Someone would say, well, what is the bottom 50% of all earners think of income earners? You can Google this right now. I'm sitting in this room. Tax Foundation. The bottom 50% of income earners pay 2.3% of all income taxes. So when someone says that we got to tax those at the top more, the question that I would ask you is, how much is enough? How much is enough? Because I've described to you the way the percentages. And I ascribe to, and I've said this before at Bartlesville communities events, that I ascribe the tax law should be just, not philanthropic. Tax law should be just, not philanthropic. And so is there justice in the tax code? I think the ultimate arbitrator of justice, that's why I love what Ben Carson was talking about when he was talking about whether it was a fair tax, flat tax, what he was advocating. But he was talking about the tithe. And that 10% in the way that God set up the tithe, okay, as to be just as to the requirement placed upon the Israelites as to what they would give to support the structure of the Levitical code, was that even in proportion to your increase, everybody gives 10%. Now, if you're extremely wealthy, you give 10%, you're going to give a lot. But if you're not very well off, you give 10%, and there's going to be something. And we don't even further than it said, if you can't even give anything, at least give a pension. The point of, and I believe, some of you may disagree with me, but I'm convinced I'm right, that God is the ultimate arbitrator of what's just. And that justice, if he says that that's fair and that's just, that everybody needs to be a participant and in proportion to your increase, and I want to point back to our current graduating tax brackets, and I want to show you how that the way our system is set up, you're already forcing the top 25% to pay almost 90% of the income tax burden. All right, let's keep going. Okay. I'm doing that rhetorical for people in this room that feel I'm not changing their mind. There are people in this room who think the top 1% are paying enough. And I go through this for people to understand, you don't see how, in terms of what's just, the load that's been put upon different tax brackets. All right, so y'all, what about someone that's making $11,900? Because according to the tax records, IRS data, you are going to be, if you're $11,900 or less, paying 10%. But let me tell you, that $11,900 is designed so everybody understands what they're actually paying. Do you know if you're making $48,000, you're not paying the full 22%? If you know this, you must be a CPA. No? Okay. You only pay that 22% when you redact the brackets ahead of it. So so if let's say you're making $48,000, you get to pay 10% on the first $11,900, second bracket, and it all gets reduced to where whatever's left after you do those first two columns leaves you, whatever's left over is where you pay at the 22%, the difference. So it's not that you pay 22% of the full $48,000. All right, so you everybody's understanding why you find these different graphs out there, why it's important to delineate. But you're going to say, well, Josh, I know people that make $12,000 and they get money back. I don't understand that. How if they're paying 10%? Okay, this is what I told you. It's going to be a chance to reiterate what we talked about. How much is the standard deduction? $15,000. 90% of the people claim it, right? What does the standard deduction say? Standard deduction says the first $15,000 now used to be $6,000, and then after 2017 it was $12,000. It says now you set aside that $15,000 and whatever's left over is what you are taxed on. So if you make $11,900, what's your tax liability? Zero. All right, now let's talk about one more element of the tax policy called the earned income tax credit. What that is it's a type of refundable tax credit. So you got deductions, you got dollar-for-dollar tax credits, and you have something called a refundable tax credit. And a refundable tax credit says you do not have to have any taxable liability owed to the government, but the government will then cut you a check. I believe tax law should be just, not philanthropic. So you can kind of figure out where I stand on this. It's why I'm against the wind subsidization, solar subsidization, because those are also refundable tax credits based upon kilowatt hours produced that the government, taking from you at large in this room, pays them for producing electricity, not because they have any taxable liability. Earned income tax credit works the same way. And the earned income tax credits, when you hear CPAs talk about people after the standard deduction will get the earned income tax credit. They'll pay nothing in tax liability, but they'll get thousands of dollars, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 in an earned income tax credit. Now, and that's in addition to what other programs may be available to them. What are those other social safety net programs? Well, Medicaid would be one, SNAP, TANF, direct cash payment, housing, etc. But the earned income tax credit is in addition to that. So, while I'm going through all this, so we all understand what's really going on in our tax code. We're going to skip through this one. This is where Medicaid, so Josh, what y'all did Medicaid? Medicaid spending was headed here. The black line represents the rate of inflation, where now what Medicaid spending is going to do. The average rate of inflation, 3.5%, okay, when we do the math, we are now going to be at the rate of inflation. So y'all, Medicaid spending is going to continue to increase. But instead of it being far beyond the rate of inflation, look at where we were at in 2020, $400 billion to spend. And look at where we're at in 2030. It almost doubled, more than doubled in 10 years. And you want to know why we have a problem with our spending is because we're not addressing some of these programs that are going way beyond the rate of inflation. The economy, the rate of growth cannot keep up with it. So post one big beautiful bill, Medicaid still continues to grow, but at the rate of inflation. Next slide. This chart, so many people, I want you to really look at the poverty rate is the most important thing on this. The blue line, when we talk about social programs, when we don't look at the poverty line and what the effect of the policy is going to be to poverty, we're really missing the mark. Look at the times where the poverty rate has declined. Think Clinton-era work requirements in this little segment right here. Clinton-era work requirements. What happened to the poverty level? It went down. So should our goal be to have more people enrolled, or should our goal be to help people get out of poverty? So what you see here is, did the population of Medicaid increase during the time that Clinton signed under the Gingrich Republicans, when they did the Clinton-era welfare reform, did the population increase on Medicaid? No. What happened to poverty? plateau right here under the years of President Trump first term. Did the population of Medicaid increase? Hang on, but did the population of Medicaid increase? No, it's not, see, look at this, it's flat. It's flat on top, that's the population. Now at the same time, what happened to the poverty line? We have to pay attention to the poverty line. On the left side, you read this, I want everybody to understand, what was Medicaid originally designed for? For the blind, the aged, the disabled, the pregnant, the nursing mothers, the caretakers of the disabled, indigent. That was when it was set up in 1965. Post Obamacare of 2014, able-bodied, those who are able to work, able-bodied, people above a certain percentage point above the federal poverty line. Now, this is where you see this growth coming from, the able-bodied. The able-bodied is why, I want you to look at this now, when it says Medicaid no longer for the poor, you have more people above the poverty line on Medicaid now than below the poverty line. Because of the able-bodied being added to it. Let's go to the next point. You're going to hear people say, well, there's going to be people after one big beautiful bill that are going to lose Medicaid coverage. Let's talk about who those are. 1.4 million of those are illegal aliens. I will show you a graph in a minute, California, and I'll show you the flow chart. California was the worst offender. We could have, from the budget committee perspective, when we were looking for dollar changes, we found that we would just go back to the 2021 coverage rate just in the state of California. We could have almost closed the gap at a point in negotiations what we needed to fix the problem on the financial gap we had in one big beautiful bill. Because California so abused the system. What I didn't tell you is, the chart was, let's put it back up on them here. Why did they abuse it? On the standard population, for the state lawmakers is where we know this, on average for generations, the state would pay 40% of the bill on Medicaid, and the federal government would pay 60% of the tab on the traditional, the disabled, blind, elderly, indigent. But when Obamacare came in, the Affordable Care Act, it said the federal government, state, talking to the states, we're going to give you $9 for only $1 for every person you put on the program. So there is an incentive that the able-bodied, because the federal government picked up 90% of the cost for the states to get the money, there was an incentive built in that California was looking to the nth degree to sign up as many able-bodied as they could so that they could get the 9-to-1 match, because they weren't having to really give a whole lot of state monies to get that. And so the focus in the last many years when it comes to Medicaid has not been on the traditional population. 1.4 million of them, illegal aliens. When you hear the CBO numbers, the millions of people by 2034, 4.8, almost 5 million of them are people that now are going to be Clinton-era work requirement compliant, and if they are, they can stay on. But what the CBO is saying is, we don't think the 4.8 million will do the 4 hours a day work requirement that's put on these people. It's a 20-hour-a-week work requirement. And what it says is either you're going to get a job for 4 hours a day, whatever 20 hours you can reach in the week's time period, or you're going to get a skill, get an education, or you do community service. And what the American Enterprise Institute found out is that they'll just replace the video and TV time for these able-bodied people just with those components. What they found is in this stat, 4.2 hours per day that was spent, okay, playing video games and watching TV, able-bodied population. And if they'll just take that amount of time and apply it to based on their own skill, getting a job, or doing community service, they can comply with that requirement, and they would still remain on Medicaid. But the CBO projects that 4.8 million will not comply. All right, let's talk about another 1.3 million. Those are the people who are not really eligible for Medicaid. Under the Biden administration, there was a 2-year time period that the Biden administration did not check your financial income eligibility. 2 years. You sign up on the program, we don't know for 2 years if you still are making the same amount of money or not. What the one big beautiful bill says is if you're going to have an income threshold, well, you need to verify that you're actually making that. So every 6 months, the one big beautiful bill will now go back and they'll say, you have to tell us what your income is. And that's where 1.3 million will come from, is that there will be people who will make more money than what Medicaid allows. All right. 15 minutes, all right, so we're going to get to questions. More information on Medicaid, you can read that when you want to, page 16. So those are still not convinced. We're still growing Medicaid at the rate of inflation. Medicaid's still going to grow. We showed you another chart. You look at the numbers. But this on page 17, for the members who said, we still want more, because we got some hospitals that are using, some information, and I need constituents to know we're really going to make sure that things are taken care of. There's a $50 billion fund in the One Big Beautiful Bill, $25 billion that every state gets access to, and then another $25 billion that is on a need basis. You can read through this if you want to. $50 billion plussed up just for service providers and Medicaid. Keep in mind, we're still going to work at the rate of inflation, but this program is out there and it's in the One Big Beautiful Bill. So when you do the scare tactics, you need to know facts. This is the money laundering scheme that California went through. You take the time to see how they're even using the 9-to-1 match. Again, not disabled population. Not the disabled population. But their focus was on the able-bodied population because they get $9 for every dollar they put in, and look at how they were able to do a shell game to be able to use it for other means and cover illegal aliens. All right. Balance. Josh, what about debt and deficit spending? We've heard you talk a lot over the years about debt and deficit spending 2.5 years. The CBO says that we're only going to grow year over year at 1.8%. The budget committee that I'm on, when we began this process back in the early spring, said we believe it's reasonable we're going to grow 2.6 trillion. The CBO answers to the budget committee specifically. We said we're going to grow 2.6% year over year. The budget committee in the red said they're only going to grow at 1.8. So this zero is balanced. Because CBO's out there saying that this bill is going to cost $3.4 trillion. And what we said was, because you're only giving us a 1.8 year over year growth rate, you're skewing the numbers. We're going to come back to this chart. Just set this one down quickly here, Billy. You say, well, how can the budget committee have set the 2.6 number? Because we went back to the last 15 years, and this is what we found. Pre-COVID, 2.8%. Under Biden, 2.7%. Since World War II, 3.1% average. And when CBO said we're going to grow 1.8%, we didn't think it was fair or truthful. So they undershot it. And so what we said was we think 2.6 is a doable number. All right, let's chart back up here. This number is what most of this is because of their growth assumption. That they're saying it's going to cost $3.4 trillion in the red. Now watch this. If you assume that we're lining up in our 2.6, it just so happens the difference between 1.8 and 2.6 is the green. The 2.6, I'm going to use 2.6 two different times, in 2 different ways. You're going to follow me here. They said 1.8, we said 2.6 year over year growth. The difference between how much revenue would come in between 1.8 and 2.6 was $2.6 trillion difference. So, when you're trying to find the balance of what it's going to do to the debt, that helps us significantly. Now, look at this. The blue represents tariffs. The blue area represents tariffs. That's just 3 years of tariffs. When we sent the bill over to the House, and I fought in the Budget Committee, Chip Roy, myself, Ralph Norman, to strengthen it because of the wind and solar components, because I didn't think those numbers were right. Well, I held it up. We got negotiations with the White House over the weekend, and we let go of the bill. When we sent it over, we had the One Big Beautiful Bill fully balanced without 3.5 years of tariffs. Chip Roy, myself, Ralph Norman, Andrew Clyde, we made sure of that. Goes to the Senate, and through a process called the Bird Bath, and some changes the Senate made to the wind and solar tax credits, the real cost, they changed it, and they sent it back over to us, and this this area of blue, now I knew was lacking, and I didn't want to have to not be able to come back to you and say we balanced it within the bill, and we had to use some tariff revenue. I didn't want to do that. And so that's why when that bill came back, and you saw my hesitation, we went back to the negotiating table in the White House. And there were significant assurances made to us, specific to my interest on the wind and solar, 3 days after the One Big Beautiful Bill was signed. If you go look, there was an executive order signed, specific to wind and solar. And that executive order changes the commenced construction definition of what is calculated to the 5% safe harbor to showing that these programs are actually reach the 5% threshold to be able to be eligible for the tax credit. And so between that and some other things, that with significant assurances from the White House, we finally voted yes. But I want to show you this. If I would have had my way, I wouldn't have to stand before you and say we have had 3.5 years of tariff revenue to make this fully balanced. But it is the reality, and it is the reality, the full Trump effect, the balance occurs that during 3.5 more years, the 10% would make sure the one big beautiful bill, as long as our projection is met, is balanced. Now you say, Josh, well, it's not met. Well, then we come down here to the yellow. And that is what happens if the tariffs are continued past the 3.5 year window. There's another $1.4 trillion. What happened when Biden came in? Did he reverse Trump's tariffs? No, he didn't. No, Trump's tariffs stayed into effect. And so recent history is showing us there's a high likelihood that yellow is going to happen. I'll give you one more thing for the budget considerations. Over here on the left, we didn't have room, we did this chart last week. But this next couple of weeks, when we go back up there, part of our budget committee negotiations with everyone was on this appropriation, on the discretionary side, we said on the mandatory plus up for defense, which we won't have time to cover tonight, if we'll hold the discretionary spending flat for fiscal year 26, then we're willing to do some mandatory plus ups on the defense in the one big beautiful bill. And so there is great certainty what we're going to end up with in a few more weeks is a flat CR, a true CR, that will yield another $500 billion, as scored by the CDO, of savings that's not even seen on this chart. And in addition to that, the rescissions bill, the Freedom Caucus pushed forward, $9 billion over 10 years is almost another $100 billion. So I want you to understand, I did the best I could. We left Florida in early spring. The Republican conference was talking about $300 billion in savings. And when you hear my friend, the Speaker of the House, say that we've got the biggest amount of savings in this bill that Congress has ever done in history, it was a little group of us that held tight, that forced what turned out to be $1.6 trillion in savings. And I will tell you that I am responsible for doing as much as I can to live up to what I told you when I ran for office. And I will tell you, there's a group of us that held the line as much as we could to get a really good product. Otherwise, it's going to be debt and deficit spending and not response. So we don't have time to do the rest of this. We talked about border on Homeland Security. I know that. We did a lot of things for border security. It took a long time to get through that. I want to hear from you. We got a large crowd. We're going to open up for questions. And John, are you getting the microphone up for questions? Okay. We're going to, in the House of Representatives, they give me a 1 minute to ask my question, to do my stuff. It's a 1 minute rule. So to try to get through this, we're going to give you a minute and a half. That keeps people from standing up and going on these long tangents, right? And respect the person in the line next behind them. So John is going to manage that for the minute and a half. We're going to go to some questions and comments. Testing.
Consider looking at shared parenting. Schedule something.
I'm not fully understanding the question, so get with our staff and let's have a conversation afterwards.
Senator Usselman, question.
Yes.
Trump is defunding Department of Education, which is great as far as I'm concerned, if you get rid of the whole thing. So is that Congress has to pass bills to make it continue on?
Okay.
Is Congress going to?
So let me give you the history of the Department of Education. We did not have the Federal Department of Education other than a statistical service prior to 1979. It flips a lot of people's lid when you start talking about getting rid of the Department of Education. But if you go back and you look at our ACT scores, the equivalent, and I got a friend who served in the Senate, was chair of the Education Committee, and so I would be more than happy to, I'm going to have facts on this, John, if I say something incorrect, you correct me, okay? But relative to the ACT, or is it NAEP, John, am I remembering correctly? NAEP scores, National Assessment for Education Progress, am I remembering all that correctly? Okay, NAEP scores, what you'll find is, from like the 1979 period, you will find in recent history, when you look at a graph, our scores are doing this, they're going down. And so, what is happening to educational attainment relative to as the federal government's growing its influence on the federal level? So, what our founders believed in, what you'll find in Federalist 45 was that there should be a laboratory of democracy, a laboratory of experimentation among the states. They believed that. And that the power of the Fed should be few and finite, limited, but the power of the states numerous and indefinite. And so that you could have state models that would be out there, and that people would pick across in another state and go, "Ooh, what they're doing on education, let's start implementing some of that." But a one-size-fits-all does not lend itself to ingenuity or a new way of seeing problems. It blends just complacency. So what I contend, what I think you are contending, that some people in this room can't imagine a world without a federal Department of Education. Go talk to my mother, who was an educator prior to 1979, and there was a world before the federal government was dictating on high how students in America could learn to read and write, and they actually could excel. And you didn't have social ideology pushed from the highest end of government down to the global classroom. I'm all for it. I believe it needs to return back to what it was prior to 1979. Yes, sir.
John Spence, been working with your folks on wind turbines, Green New Deal since January. I want to tell everybody everything Josh's folks have told me, Dan, Josh, and Cameron, has happened, including we had stuff in the big bill that really didn't get what we wanted, and we got the executive order. We now have rules, so my question to you is, we now have rules from Scott Bessent. Is it going to be sufficient, is what we've got in place now going to be sufficient to stop these turbine projects that have not broke ground today?
All right. So, thank you for that. This was my chart that I became somewhat infamous for in Congress a few months ago, showing this chart as many as I could. Because when I held up the bill in the Budget Committee for that weekend, I went through negotiations, and I'm thankful to the President and his team. They knew I was fighting for what was in line with their agenda. But they knew we had a bunch of people in Congress who had gotten on the dole for the wind industry and the solar industry, financially. And they knew we were fighting that. Because everybody loves the max checks from these, corporate entities. We're more than happy to, every year, this is the history of what has happened since the 1990s per page. Thank you. This is the history of Congress. When you go back and look at my comments when I had to build up that first time relative to getting a solution over the weekend, I pointed to the fact that what WIN specifically had done in Oklahoma on a state level, and what I would rather have seen this chart, 13 different times Congress, starting way back in the 1990s, said, when we get done with this amount of period of years, we'll start getting rid of the production tax credit, subsidy, the refundable tax credit going to wind. And guess what happened? 13 different times. Congress would come back in and go, yeah, we didn't really mean that. Who was changing that? The lobbyists handing out the checks. And so when we were going to be asked to go out, as I told people in leadership, I'm not going to go out to my constituents and tell them we save $500 billion out of the Green New Scam when I know what's going to happen. So what we fought for, what did end up getting done, we had a much better version of our negotiation that weekend that Chip and myself spearheaded. And the Senate went in and did some changes. The Senate made a change for anybody who get admittance that first year, and they would have 4 years. First year. But they had to reach what is an IRS definition of commenced construction. That is in IRS code. And what President Trump and his team, with wise understanding, did, and that 3 days after, we all agreed to sign off on this deal, they went in and said, we're not going to let this thing be open for abuse for whoever wants to just say that they've commenced construction because they threw some gravel out on the ground to create a road, and we might build a windmill over here, or we might do solar. So what happened is, you automatically saw the wind industry start doing this financially. You started financial investments, you saw that. Okay? And so there's a lot of people who know the wind industry and the solar. I'm not anti-wind or solar. I'm anti them taking your money to prop up their industry, and you need to know this as Oklahomans. We're a top 5 exporter of natural gas in the state. This town in particular knows a whole lot about what I'm talking about. Top 5 exporter of natural gas. And what was happening in our electric grid was we were displacing in this country, because of tax dollars taken from you, paying refundable tax credits to wind and solar, we were replacing natural gas's place in the electric grid for wind and solar being the fastest growing part of what was on the electric grid in the last several years. And natural gas utilization was being set aside while your tax dollars were propping up an industry that couldn't stand on its own. That was not only going to hurt our nation, but our reliability, we saw in Texas, it was going after the oil and gas industry in an unfair and setting our nation up for national security concerns. 87%, almost of every component from solar is coming from China, folks. And so much, when I was working with this on the state level and the wind stuff, do you know how many people are investors in Europe in the wind stuff? When you're paying the state tax credits or those federal tax credits, the investment coming from Europe, Spain, and Italy. So what we were doing was we're handing Oklahoma economy over to other countries. All right, who's next?
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Thank you for having us here. I am a pediatric physical therapist.
Yes, ma'am.
So of course I'm quite impacted by Medicaid, and most of the children that I serve currently are Medicaid recipients.
Yes, ma'am.
I also, many of the parents are Medicaid recipients. All of my parents are working parents at this point. Medicaid is vital for them and for their well-being. I guess one of my questions is, when we do the research, the majority of fraud at the state and federal level is not poor people. It's actually committed by very college-educated men. And I have looked that up several times to make sure. So I feel like sometimes we're going after the wrong people. My question is, why is my reimbursement rate going down? It's gone down almost, it's approaching 15% in the last 5 years, as well as the services that are being provided. And why are we going towards the NCOs now, who are really there as for profits?
So what Medicaid service provision are you involved in? What Medicaid service providing?
Student care.
But what type of?
So that I'm a pediatric physical
Okay.
therapist, so I work with primarily disabled children.
So most of your clientele is the historic Medicaid population, traditional population.
Yes, they are, and my reimbursement's going down, their services are going down.
But what I tell you is,
And
go ahead.
NCOs are making a profit. And so now all my services are being managed by NCOs. And as you know, most of them are there for their shift.
Look, I've had issues this is a state issue relative to managed care, but when I was in office, I had issues with managed care. I made it known, I had issue with it. And what you're talking about is that your clientele, they're the traditional population. I'm going to say that what we've done is, by focusing so much of our attention on the non-traditional population, that has been a real harm to the Medicaid community at large. I apologize.
Hello. So I'm a Navy veteran, and I consider myself pretty patriotic. I appreciate the fact that you stood for the Pledge of Allegiance. I just want to know where you stand on Trump's executive order recently, today, trying to criminalize the desecration of our flag.
Look, there is already, I've had briefly no time to even think about this or talk about this, but I will just give you some initial thoughts, okay? Because I've been doing town halls all day. But what I've heard, there already is a law relative to you cannot destroy American currency. You can't set dollar bills on fire. You can't destroy coins. So I look forward to becoming more educated. I'm not a lawyer. I think it is a shame that people would burn the American flag.
My name's Dan Droge.
My First Amendment, patriotic.
So just ignore this and continue on. Don't give this any attention.
Don't remove him.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
I know you work for the late Tom.
Yes.
You worked with the late Tom Coburn. And you admired him greatly.
Yes. As did my friend Dan Harrigan, Bartlesville native, both did.
Tom Coburn, one of his more notable quotes was, "My heart aches for less divisiveness, less polarization, less mindless partisanship, which at times sounds almost hateful to the ears of Americans." I think if the senator were alive today, his heart would not be aching, it would be breaking, like many of the hearts in this nation, and perhaps some people in this room, like my heart is breaking. It's breaking. It's breaking because I see masked men in our nation's capital. And in our nations around the world, countries, like a third world country, or Russia, or Hungary. My heart breaks because I see the assault on scientific knowledge. My heart breaks because I see the first step toward rewriting history. With biased fallacies and outright falsehoods. My heart breaks because I see threats to free and fair elections. Here's my question, because I could go on and on.
We don't.
In our political system, which we learned from the 5th grade, is a system of checks and balances. You, sir, as the legislature, are the check against an authoritative executive branch. When are you going to say no to the crisis that surrounds us?
What crisis? You didn't have a specific question, you idiot. Generalization.
About where I stood my ground on positions of conscience, and I'll continue to operate out of conscience. All right, next question.
Sir, what is your position on the Dignity Act?
Help me understand what you're talking about, the Dignity Act.
Right, the Dignity Act of 2025 that has just been reintroduced in the House of
By who?
Representatives by a bipartisan group of.
So there's thousands of bills introduced. You have to give me an education. I don't know what.
Right. It would oppose dividing up families when people are arrested, when illegal immigrants are arrested. It would oppose dividing up those families.
This is the Maria Salazar bill.
Yes.
I'm aware of it. Yeah, I don't support it.
Can we get an explanation, sir?
Just after an explanation, won't finish this question, or should I go?
Yeah, I mean, why I don't support it is I believe that it's going to create more of the opportunity that we saw in the last 4 years. That you're going to create an atmosphere where people don't see there's consequences for breaking the law of entering this country illegally. Good question.
I grew up on a farm just over the county line, as I'm sure you grew up down in Ada. I want to clarify a few points, because you can check this on congress.gov, the text of One Big Beautiful Bill. It cuts Medicare by over $50 billion, including over
Sir, it
$2
doesn't
billion.
touch Medicare.
I think you might want to reread the bill,
Sir,
sir.
I've been involved in the process. I've been on the list. It doesn't touch
It
Medicare.
also
Are you meaning Medicaid?
I'm also, well, it cuts Medicaid as well. Largely cuts Medicaid, including over $2 billion for the state of Oklahoma. You have put my hospital at risk, sir. I'm not on my phone, but you know how easy it is to get hurt on the job. I'm sure you do too. Why should, when we can read this and we can read the text of the bill on congress.gov, why should we believe what's in this?
Because what you're saying is not true. You don't have any facts to back up what you just said.
I can read the bill. And I can read
You don't have facts to back up what you said, I'm sorry, you don't. This is the problem, people will make statements and they don't have facts to back it up.
Hey, Congressman, how you doing?
Good.
Good to see you again. Hey, on page 7, we have non-defense at 950 billion. So what is that?
Non-defense, 950 billion?
We didn't talk about that.
So that's the discretionary side of the budget. Remember I was showing the chart about only 26% is part of the 12 appropriation bills? We're about to get through that process when I get back in a few weeks. Half of everything of those 12 appropriations that we spend money on, in terms of dollar value, is defense. Every other thing that you can think of that affects most of you in this room, if it's not Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, food stamps, interest on the debt, all those other government programs, USDA, Department of Labor, Department of Energy, Department of your favorite, EPA, all of those fall under discretionary spending. So the amount of government in what's left over in the discretionary spending is the discretionary side. Discretionary side.
All right, it's 7:12 right now, so we got time for 2 more questions.
Thank you for doing this. I have a question on page 8,
Yes, ma'am?
where it talks about the percentage of gross national product is revenues and spending. Even in 2054, there's still quite an imbalance.
Yes.
Fast forward, do you think we'll ever be able to reconcile those?
Well, I've been working in the last couple of weeks in formulating some ideas, as our speaker's been talking about a Part 2 reconciliation bill. I've got 2 ideas that I'm talking to the speaker about. Jack, you still in the room?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the thing we talked about in the earned income tax relative to illegal immigration, and the loophole, $20 billion loophole. So I don't know if you have any updates from CBO on any of that. Do you have any updates from CBO?
Yes, so currently there are several legal aliens who do receive earned income tax credits.
That's a refundable tax credit.
Refundable tax credit because for the past 4 years, while Biden administration let in countless legal aliens to the nation, they simultaneously were able to get more social security numbers without actually verifying citizenship.
So just to expedite this, I've got an idea of what we're gonna be able to look at for reconciliation part 2 that you gotta have leverage. If you wanna do another reconciliation bill, you gotta have leverage. Between this and something else that has a $20 billion per year price tag, $200 billion over the course of a 10-year window, I'll be approaching the speaker. If our numbers work out, we can get some validity on this, on an idea to do a reconciliation part 2.
Thank you, Congressman.
Yes,
It's too much out of consensus.
I know. Oh, that's right.
The skies and weather, they have been hijacked by geoengineering programs. They're no longer even individual rain clouds, but rather a gray mist, a chemical fog, which moves like glaciers overhead and delivers a poisonous chem rain to us, which is killing crops, disrupting plant life, killing bees, which have all been disappeared, and this is causing non-natural weather calamities. I have pictures of the beams being fired into Oklahoma from Texas, which spurred and spawned the tornado which hit last year. The satellites pick up the infrared beams that the various government agencies actively lie and tell us that what we see with our eyes is not real. 11 new clouds were added to the mountain 6 years ago.
You get your question. Go ahead.
Okay, do you plan, can you do something about the chemtrails? Can you make a committee? Can you talk to Lee Zeldin, the EPA, because they are spraying aluminum, cadmium, strontium, barium. Those are radioactive salts. There's a whole list, and anyone can do a sweat test and see the metals in them. You can collect the rain, and you can see. I have three different tests that show all the chemicals. So everything you talked about today.
Just so I can get to this next question over here, and just say this. If you've got verifiable information on this, I have yet to see verifiable information on this. So we'll go to this gentleman over here. I'm gonna ask, we'll let this gentleman say something. And then we'll be done. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much, Congressman. Quick question and follow-up if possible on the tariffs.
Okay.
Latest estimate I've seen so far this year, we've had close to $100 billion coming in tariffs.
In addition to, at the 6-month mark, we're $100 billion above what we normally would be at the 6-month mark. Continue.
Okay. So my question is, in view of the promise that we've heard over and over again, that the bulk of the tariffs is going to go to pay down the national debt, have there been any payments, I guess that's in the form of buying back bonds, to the national debt from the $100 billion plus?
No, no, because as I showed you earlier, what I was fighting for and what I had great confirmation to the end is I wanted to allow the tariff revenue to be utilized for other purposes. That it basically all be, not the 3.5 years that I showed you. I remember the map I tried to show you all of it, the 3.5 years makes the solvency, in the way that I've looked at the map over and over again. What I wanted was for the full tariff revenue to be applied to other means. It's going to take, in the way that I've looked at the map, the way I feel comfortable being honest to you, it's going to take at least 3.5 years of the tariff revenue to be able to bring the balance that when the bill left the House, we had balance. But through the burn back and other Senate changes, it stripped some of that out.
That leaves us with a hard task to trust our president that any of the tariffs is going to go to the national debt.
Well, so the one as I showed you now, that 1.4 trillion, if anybody has the page number and can sort out the page number, what stat was that? That 1.4 trillion. Thank you, Josh, appreciate that. On page 19 of your handout, that 1.4 trillion could be applied for deficit reduction. This for 10 years, tariff revenue 10%, CDO says is 2.2 trillion. For the 800 billion that we have to make the math work for balance, the difference there is 1.8. 2.2 minus the 0.8 is 1.4. And so you'll see that as the 1.4 extra at the bottom on the page side.
So could you explain to all of us who actually writes the check that pays for the tariff? For example, if Walmart imports something from Vietnam, who writes that check to get it into the U.S. Treasury?
So, relative to the importers, I'm not going to tell you that I can describe fully what happens with Amazon. For the person in the room that's buying Sheen, they get your hand and smack it, okay? Okay, thank you. Somebody thought that was funny. Appreciate that, man. I can't tell you if thanks, man. I can't tell you if Amazon, based on inventory, has a warehouse full of things that you might have purchased from China before the 50% tariff came in or not. The importer will pay it at some point, and it's passed on to the consumer. So, you know, but let me give you a stat that you need to know. Year over year, already people know about the tariff, the 10% floor. Year over year, last month's numbers show us at 2.7%. 1 July, previous July, 2.7%. Optimal, right? Optimal, 2.5. So everybody who's decrying that tariffs are causing this major increase, you need to look at what the facts are bearing out right now. All right. God bless you. Appreciate you caring to be here. I'll go down for a minute for this document. Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a great day in America. President Trump is President of the United States of America. Josh Brecheen is our U.S. Congressman. The Constitution is being obeyed as much as possible. Thank God that Kamala Harris is not our president. Thank God that Joe Biden is no longer our president. Or should I say the auto pin is no longer our president. Yes, thank God they're trying to clean up the mess that was inherited from the Biden administration, who spent more money and raised our deficit more than it had been from every other president in U.S. history. Thank God that Bartlesville's drag shows are done. The Pride events are over. Oklahoma for Equality Bartlesville edition is shut down. Thank God the sodomites of Bartlesville have taken a major hit, and they're in disarray and disbandment. Yes, Josh Brecheen presents facts, and the Democrat liberal God haters in the crowd could only present gratuitous assumptions and assertions, straw man arguments, had no facts, no basis. Why do liberals love straw man arguments? Why do liberals build their life and their philosophy on straw man arguments? Why do they build their whole philosophy on gratuitous assertions and not facts? Because they hate the truth. Liberal Democrats hate the truth. That's why they hate God, and they hate God's holy Bible. They don't obey God's commandments. That's why they don't do it. And so we find out, thank God for Donald Trump as our president and Josh Brecheen. Yes, Josh Brecheen's got facts, and he shuts down all the gratuitous assertions. Facts don't care about your feelings. Facts never have cared about your feelings. Your feelings do not trump the facts of life. Thank God for America and Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen. Thank God that Kamala Harris is not our president. Thank God the sodomites and the lesbians have been shut down in Bartlesville. No more drag events, no more pride events this year. Oklahoma for Equality, Bartlesville's been shut down. Yes, Bartlesville's a better place, even though there are so many God haters in this country and in this county. Thank God for Donald Trump and Josh Brecheen, who presented factual basis, testimony, and a presentation that the liberals in the crowd could only produce gratuitous assertions and straw man arguments and fictional ideologies. Facts do not care about your feelings. Facts never have cared about your feelings, and your feelings do not trump facts. Thankfully, the child groomers of Bartlesville, even on the police force and inside of the administrations of city government and county government, have been curtailed to some degree. Yes, the DHS has been exposed in Bartlesville by putting kids into homosexual grooming families. Yes, we've got your number here in Bartlesville. We shut down your pride event and your drag shows. Yeah, we know there's child groomers in this city who love little kitties. You love to molest little boys and little girls. We know there's a bunch of older perverts in this city. We know it quite a bit. We've dealt with them for many years.
Hey, we are agreeing with you, dear.
Well, good. You're in what?
We agree with what
Wonderful.
you're saying.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Very good that you're doing that.
Yes?
Too bad you couldn't have a little more. Are you filming me?
Sure.
Don't film me.
Well, I have to.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do.
Never mind.
Hang in there.
Thank you, sir. She said she agreed. Somehow I don't believe her. Yes, there was the same issue came up twice today. I was saying, oh boy, Josh has got an answer for that one. But that one man with that diatribe, how come these liberals always have to read these talking points? They can't think of it off their top of their head. They have to write it down and recite a liberal talking point piece. But that one man to my right with that long dissertation brought up a certain topic. I forgot it now. It escaped my mind, but it was the second time it came up today, and Josh blew it out of the water the first time. And there was so much to that man's diatribe that Josh didn't really directly address anything because there was no question. They want to read statements but not have questions. Why do Democrats always do that? They think they can just read things, recite things, and rehearse their talking points, and they all start getting excited about their talking points because their talking points is their Bible, is their salvation, is their religion. Whether it makes sense or not, whether it's true or not, their talking points gets them all excited. It is amazing. They think they're somebody when they virtue signal like that. But I'll think of it probably in the middle of the night. And it was amazing. Well, that's the end of the show for today. With Josh Brecheen traveling around the state doing town halls. Now you know why most of these politicians don't do town halls. They don't have the data. They don't have the facts. They don't know the subjects. They don't know what they're going to be presented with in opposition with talking points. They're not ready for debate and rebuttal. And so Josh is very well prepared. I'm impressed. He's one of the best politicians I've seen in town halls. Could you imagine Kamala Harris trying to do a town hall? I mean, word salad Sally. She wouldn't know what to do. So yes, Josh Brecheen is well studied, well prepared, has a great presentation. Starting tomorrow, day 2.